Publishing for Profit podcast is brought to you by Ghostwriters & Co. Earn more money by publishing better content and learn how to increase your thought leadership so you can build your brand. Head over to ghostwritersandco.com for more information. That's ghostwritersandco.com. And now, your host, Joel Mark Harris.
Hello and welcome to the Publishing for Profit podcast. This is your host, Joel Mark Harris, and we are on episode number 30 today. We interview Sammy Taggett. He is the creator of real-time radio. He's also a DJ, and he DJs under the name Shoebox Moses, and it's actually a really interesting story about how he came by that name. So in this episode, we talk about everything podcasting, how to start your podcast, how to produce it, and how to market it. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. Hello, Sammy. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Joel. Good to be here.
Awesome. So, pleasure having you, obviously, but also a little intimidating because you will be able to critique my podcasting game here because you're obviously a very experienced DJ, podcaster, and a bunch of other things. So hopefully you'll go easy on me to begin with.
Well, let's be totally honest, Joel. I was just plugging in things, moving things around, looking for a microphone input. Battery was dying on a camera. So don't worry, I have no room for judgment here at all. And I think that's probably a good lesson for anybody starting a podcast or has a current one. It's just the consistency of that studio, right? Just getting in there and making sure everything's set up and where it needs to be. Even the fact that I'm DJing and have a bunch of shows and things like that is no excuse that stuff is in disarray, right? Especially when I got a cool show I'm going to be on. So thanks for being patient with me.
No problem at all. So I want to start with, what is the genesis of your DJing name? So it's DJ Shoebox Moses. I'm sure there's an interesting story behind that.
So I was an adopted Filipino out of the Philippines, and I've known that my whole life. And thanks for asking. It's a beautiful part of my journey for sure. But as an adopted Filipino, I grew up here in the United States, and since I was in my mid-20s, I always had a longing to go back and find out where I was from and kind of find my roots, so to speak. And I got that opportunity 5 years ago, and in that journey, we actually found out when I got to the orphanage that I was actually left in a shoebox in a dumpster as a baby. And so one of the cool things about learning that, it was kind of a hard realization. Obviously, that's not what anyone really expects, or it's kind of a hard thing kind of to swallow at first, obviously. But the cool thing about that is I've learned to take that initial pain and turn that into a story of inspiration for myself, and then for others that like to follow me too. So Shoebox Moses was kind of given to me. I was playing a show for a really amazing group of entrepreneurs, Neckar Island, home of Sir Richard Branson, and I was just kind of processing everything. This was right after I'd found everything out, and I told him my vision. After I had learned that, it was even more, compounded. I wanted to go back and make an impact, and I wanted to figure out a way to go back and serve the kids in the orphanage that I was from, and, go back and, in essence, so they said, kind of set your people free, similar to how some of the great people go back, and how they were joking and started calling me Shoebox Moses, and that's where Shoebox Moses came from.
That's a really cool story, and really inspirational that you can take something that is, like you said, it's a hard truth to come to, and to take it and to be inspired by it. So I think that's really amazing. You mentioned that you have a charity that helps these orphans in the Philippines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So I have a nonprofit called the Foundlings, which is basically set up by it was originally set up with my business partner and co-founder. Her name's Brandy Shigley, and it was amazing. She was actually adopted out of the same orphanage. We found that out on that journey, and it's set up to do a couple things. One, it's designed to install new education platforms for kids so that they can work their way out of their current situation. And it's also designed to cover basic needs for the orphanage. So we help provide school supplies, socks, food, clothing, and then along with that, we also work to put in new education platforms so that the kids can learn things like how to podcast, how to market, how to build websites, how to do things that the new world's going to need them to do. And so, what's great about things like this, just learning how to create a podcast and how to market the podcast, all that stuff, Joel, is stuff that we want to one day pass on to kids, not just there, but kids all over the world too. So that's what the Foundlings does.
Super cool. So you're obviously a DJ. Has music always been a part of your life, and how did you get into DJing?
That's a great story. Music's probably been a big part of my life since I was in my early teens, right? I'm not very tall. I'm from the Philippines. So one of the things I needed to do is try and figure out how to stand out. And one way I could do that was learning how to play the guitar. And that always kind of starts the journey, right? But my dad was an incredible musician, still is, and so he kind of got me into music, and that's where I started. The whole becoming a DJ, though, that started, not until like the early 2010, 2011, and after a series of events and a series of careers, so to speak, I ended up moving back home to Colorado at the time. The only job I could get was in the bathroom at a nightclub, and so I was the guy handing out mints and napkins for folks. But you know, through that space, I could see like you'd step out of my bathroom and like right, I could see the DJs playing, and I was like, I gotta get the hell out of where I'm at. This is not where I belong. Have you ever had that where you're like, this is not where I'm supposed to be? And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. You're just like, okay, I know I'm destined and for bigger things. And so that's what I knew. And so watching these guys, I'd seen DJs before, but I was determined to figure out how to learn to do this craft. And so what I would do, Joel, is I would save my tip money and I would buy those DJs drinks, and they would stay after and kind of teach me how to DJ. And it took about 5, 6 weeks of just working 10, 20 minutes, after the bar and the club would close, and they would let me play with their stuff. So it was a Friday night, and one of our DJs, I don't even remember his name, but I do remember he could not stand up, and he was flailing about, and so I popped out of the bathroom and threw on some music, and we were using these it was a rain interface. I remember that at the time, so it took me a little bit of time to kind of figure out exactly how to get it all working and synced up. Digital had just come on, so I had all the music that I knew, and I played 5 songs, and those songs just turned the club up. And it was amazing because it was that time where you just like, that Eminem, that cliche moment, you own it kind of thing. And
From 8 Mile. Yeah.
I was like, yes. Yeah. And so that was mine. And I played, and he kind of came to, and he's like, oh man, I'm going to lose my damn job if I did not pop up out of this situation. So I ended up really taking the reins for 20 minutes, had my 20 minutes of fame, went back in the bathroom, feeling like $1 million. And one of the promoters came in, and he was like, yo, you just kind of knocked our socks off. What was that? We thought you just worked in the bathroom. And It was that introduction. He introduced me to another promoter that had a bar opening, and then I got introduced to a big promoter in Denver. A little bit later, I played my first New Year's in front of 2,000 people, saved my money to buy my first little DJ controller, and the rest is kind of history. And then, have you heard of the reticular activating system? Are you
No,
familiar with that?
no,
What do you have a car in Vancouver, Joel?
no.
Okay.
Transit. Yeah.
Transit. Okay, so you have maybe a favorite car that you know, or you got
Mhm.
a car when you were a kid. You know when you got that car and all of a sudden you looked
Pontiac
everywhere.
Trans Am. That was my first car, white. It was convertible.
Ooh,
Amazing,
lovely.
amazing car. Yeah.
And then when you saw that Pontiac Trans Am, did you start noticing that Trans Am everywhere?
Hmm.
So that's your reticular activating system. Tony Robbins talks about that. What my reticular activating system was focused on was how to get in front of the best, most influential people as an entertainer and somebody that can serve them in other spaces, And in this case, our conversation leading into how to create their stories and how to become a podcast and a podcast producer. And so that's what happened with me is I ended up just through a series of really intentional work and staying in front of really amazing I'll let that. Can you hear that?
No,
Oh, okay. That's just me.
no.
But I'll just back up. So to through a series of really intentional work, not just on myself, but in knowing who my market audience was. I knew after I played those shows, I knew that I could find my way into like kind of a corporate niche, and I always had my eyes set on playing for the most purpose-driven people doing amazing things on the planet. And I'm not even sure where that belief came from. I think I always loved personal development. I always was into that. And so that's really how I got started in music. One from the bathroom, and then that wedge learning how to DJ put me on these stages with some incredible events and some incredible entrepreneurs, and that was done through, staying focused on who I wanted to serve. So that was really it's been a beautiful turn of events, and so since that time, kind of coming full circle, one of the things I learned, not only do we understand how to really throw down a really good party, we really know how to soundtrack their event and how to really get people to just feel something, right? And so we started, and I say we because I have an agency with other entertainers. We just started playing all over the United States for incredible entrepreneurs and incredible events. And then one thing I just started to see, as you've known, is that they were all making podcasts and they were all doing these incredible things. And one of the things that they weren't knowing how to do was soundtrack those things and make people feel stuff, and then how to make money doing it, and how to have fun doing it, and how to do these more engaging things inside of a podcast than just talking, like two talking heads. And so it's funny that being a musician, which thank you for asking about that, and kind of knowing marketing and things like that, it's a huge piece of a successful podcast, right? And so that's kind of what led me to connect with you.
Hmm.
Lauren connected us, and I think, she's an incredible marketer and an incredible podcast creator herself. So, but that's what that's where it all came from. It's so funny. It's just one of those things. That's where we're at.
So you talked about getting in front of influential people, and I think that's something that, of course, everybody wants to do. Can you give me some tactics of how you did that and how somebody might go about, getting in front of their, if maybe ideal client or ideal
Yeah.
person?
Great question. It comes down to a few different things. The main thing is genuineness, at least from my experience. It comes from genuine care and being a genuine person, right? So somebody that can, ultimately get to somebody. Let's say you get to somebody that you are you admire, how do you ask them to be on your show, or how do you, what does that look like? And the first thing you need to be able to do is prove to them that you actually know their stuff. It's funny how many people are just like, they shotgun this approach and they go after people that they think have big numbers, will improve their listenership, or scrub an email list or something like that, when it really comes down to one of the smartest things you can do, not only just to get somebody on your show, but to really talk to somebody that you really care about, and know their industry, and have a genuine fondness for them. And my friend Mark Wade, who runs virtual summits, talks, he was like, how do you get in front of so many of these people? How do you keep getting booked over and over? And the short answer was that I just give a damn. And I do. I love them. I know their family. I know so much more about them than just what's happening. So that's the first thing, is you want to really know your audience. And if you can know them even more than just like what they're doing, and have an idea of things that really matter to them, because a lot of the big people that you're going to try and go after, they have things that they really care about. A lot of them have a nonprofit that they like. They donate their time to a certain organization, a church or a school or things like that. And with the ability to not be like too creepy, you can find out a lot about the people that you really like, right? And so I would implore people to know all about that person, as much as you can. And then a really big piece is to know about the audience. What is their audience paying? What can you bring to that? Right? So that's another thing. So know them, know their company ethos, their culture, and then know the pain that their audience is trying to alleviate and fix. So those are two big things. And it's funny, a lot of the folks that do interviews, you know this just as much as I do, is that they don't ask that. They just want the numbers. Like for you, kudos, you were asking me about music and my nonprofit. I didn't think you were going to go that direction at all. So I mean, that's there you go. There's one of the big advanced tips right there, guys. I hope you're watching that. Well done. Yeah.
And then, so how did you get into podcasting from, because I mean, I can see there's probably some similarities between DJing and podcasting, but there's also a lot of differences. So how did you first get into that space?
Yeah, that was kind of another really proximity is power kind of situation for me. I ended up moving to California, and I was lucky enough to get to stay with one of my mentors, who actually is a CEO for JJ Virgin, and they have a incredible health and wellness company that they teach health and wellness practitioners how to market. And I ended up, after playing their event, getting to know them really well, giving a damn. I really love his family, and I love what they're doing. And we just hit it off, and I moved to California, and I ended up living in his guest suite. And what was crazy about that is that being around him, one of the pains that they had is they were falling behind in production on podcasting. And so he asked me, as a music producer and somebody that does music, do you think that you could possibly help us catch up? Just edit some stuff. And I, as all good entrepreneurs, I didn't even think about saying no. I was like, oh, of course I can do that. And then I had to kind of figure out what the hell to do next. and and lucky for me, one of my best friends growing up, who has been one of my best friends since I was like 8 years old, actually younger than that. He worked for a radio station for 25 years and had produced commercials and shows and podcasts. And he had a really funny podcast called Beer Army Nation, and I would always listen to his stuff, and he has like this incredible radio personality, and I asked him if he could help me with these podcasts. And it wasn't like, hey, I can not only can I help, let me show you how to make these things amazing and how you can take the audio up and really blow this stuff out of the water. And so his name is Mike Galloway, and he was like, yeah, let's do this thing. And so he helped me get their first 6 podcasts done. And then those 6 turned into 12, and then 12 turned into another customer. And then we were doing the Betty Rockers and Dan Sullivans and Mike Koenigs and JJ Virgins, and it was just off to the races. And that was like, that was last year in May.
Mm.
So we haven't been doing it long, to be totally transparent, but we have had to hit the gas and go 150 miles an hour right down the runway to stay up to date with what the trends are, and then to really stay up to date with how to make podcasting and video casting even more engaging. Right? It's a whole encompassing thing. So that's how we got started. How did you get started? I was wondering how you got started.
So yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do, and we've had this conversation, but like love podcasts, I love audio, I love going to the gym and just, instead of listen, like I love music too, don't get me wrong there, but I like to listen to my podcasts, and yeah, Tim Ferriss is a huge inspiration, and would go to the gym and like, do some weights and listen to the podcast, and that's always something I've wanted to do. And then it was only really like COVID, when things kind of shit hit the fan, and I was like, oh, okay, like now I have time to do something that I really love. And so it started through that, but I mean, it's always been something that, yeah, I've really loved. And I have a journalist background, so love meeting new people, love interviewing them, and it was just a natural fit. So there you go.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I kind of forgot that you had that background because we had similar stuff
Yeah,
in
yeah,
in
yeah.
our past. Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. And that's yeah. So I think a lot of people kind of enter the podcast space like that, right? Like, oh, I love listening to these, and there's never been a time where the barrier to entry to get into something's been lower,
Hmm.
with the opportunity to impact people when done properly, and to God willing, stick with it enough that you can eventually monetize the show, impact people around the world, learn some marketing chops, and get yourself in front of incredible audiences. The thing that we always talk about podcasting and the difference between radio is it's not radio and podcasting is pretty amazing because you have listeners that are coming to you. They are, once they come to you, they're in listening, right? And if they stay with you, you've got a fan. You've got somebody that knows your stuff. And then if you are this person that they can know, like, and trust through this communication style, there's there's an ample opportunity for you to serve them and help them fix the things that they're listening to you for. And then there's another opportunity to inevitably make a sale that will do good for both of you, and you actually get great feedback from those audiences. But they're embedded and they're listening to you, and they're dedicated listeners. They're not cold people that we're trying to pull off the radio with a commercial or this, or off of the internet with an ad or anything. They found you,
Mm.
however they found you, and they're listening to you. I think you were telling me too, you have thousands of downloads or something like right now a month. That's thousands of people that are listening to Joel talk
Hmm.
about podcasting and talking, and you only need 100 of those to consume something or love what you've done of such value to purchase something from you maybe once a month, or something bigger once a quarter, and all of a sudden you've got a monetizing little engine. You learn how to do some Facebook ads, and drive listeners to your show, and or put a dynamic ad inside your show. The possibilities to serve people are endless. It's such a medium. And it's funny, we were talking about this yesterday or 2 days ago. One of the things that kills me as we're working diligently to set up our podcast and get our podcast going is that I'm watching people crush it, kill it. And I'm like, I want to make my podcast. And we're like in the middle of producing so many of them. It's so hard to be like, oh my God, I want to have all these ideas, but I'm still can't wait to get to them. And I think that's what we wanted to share today was like, how are some of these folks killing it, and marketing and making money, and things like that. But I'll kind of let you lead on what stuff you wanted to cover real quick, because I know we could go super deep down the rabbit hole. But what would help your listeners the most with what we've got?
Yeah. So First off, there's so much we can cover and we'll get to it. But something that comes to my mind is that, you're obviously a very creative person. DJing is a very creative industry. Podcasting is a very creative industry. And
Without a
what
doubt.
tends to happen is that not a lot of creative people tend to not be very good with the business sense and the marketing sense. So how did you learn that? Was that something that came naturally, or was that something you had to work at really hard?
Oh, I had to work so hard at that. It came out of it came out of a ton of pain. Because with creatives, the problem with creatives is we think in a creative space, and then the follow through usually isn't there. The attention to details is almost null and void.
Mm-hmm.
Our quick starting mind is like, yeah, let's do this, and then our implementation on things, sometimes it's really good. And for me, to learn that stuff came through a lot of failures. That's where it really came from. I was like, why do we have such a cool song out? Why do we have such a thing? Why is this club empty? Why is this no one listening to this? Why is no one buying our stuff? Why did I've launched a couple online products and spent hours, days, weeks building them and sold nothing. I'm like, and it's a marketing game. And so one of the things that I did, again, setting my sights on working with people that could really help me, I kind of took it upon myself to try and get myself nudged into a digital marketing arena. Like, how do I learn this and have fun doing it and make money? That was my question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the one thing I can do to learn marketing? This is what I asked myself this question from a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't realize I was asking myself this question, but this question is really important. And it's one of the most powerful questions that you can ask yourself when you want to really circumvent all the little stuff. And this question, they spent 5 years creating this question, and it helps you get things done so fast and so effectively. And the question is this: what is the one thing I can do that, if done, makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And so I was thinking to myself, to bring it back to how did I learn marketing and how did I learn how to get in front of people? And I was like, well, what's the one thing I could do that would teach me some marketing, but get me the resources to learn marketing and learn from the best people? And so that actually put me on the stage for Digital Marketer, which is traffic and conversions creator. So traffic and conversions, one of the biggest online marketing summits in the world, and I ended up being the DJ for that. So that's where I started to really ingest marketing knowledge, right? I was like, whoa, this guy does this guy does that. And I was just inundated with the best marketers on the planet. And so that's what happened, is I ended up taking time to meet them
Mm-hmm.
and become homies with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just was an incredible, it was an incredible move, and it was super lucky. I'm gonna take one pause real fast for your editor, real
Sure.
quick. I had a quick emergency. Dude, I just saw my phone explode.
Dear.
Mm, Do you? What's the what's the next direction you want to go? So yeah,
Let's dive deep into podcasting.
yeah, totally. So that's where I learned, and then we can pick up right there. Hmm. But yeah, that was like the best move though. Play for
Mm-hmm.
traffic and conversion. I was like, oh snaps. So that's what I did.
So it sounds like you are very self-taught and self-motivated to, to get to that next step, which is great. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, okay, so somebody's listening or watching this and they're like, okay, I really want to start a podcast. What are the first steps somebody can do to make that leap?
Well, there's a couple places you could start. The first reason, or the first place I would start, if somebody is wanting to start a podcast is to ask themselves, why do you want to start a podcast? It's just kind of it's the clarity you need to have around anything. Why am I doing what I'm doing is the first place to start. And from that spot, there is a multitude of places you can go. So you kind of start with why I'm starting a podcast, which will lead you into the next question of, once I know why I'm doing it, it will kind of guide you into the format that you want to do. Do you want to do interviews, or do you want to just talk solo? Do you want to do an informative one? Do you want to create a podcast that's just straight for entertainment? Is it going to be comical? Is it going to be humorous? Is it going to have an NPR format? So there's a bunch of different questions that get turned up from there. But the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, why am I starting a podcast?
Cool. And then what equipment do you need to start a podcast?
Yeah, equipment is it's easier now than ever to get equipment to start, but it's here's the caveat: you can get all the equipment you want, but you need to learn how to use it. And so getting equipment and knowing how to use it properly are actually two things that I think should be taught better, because a lot of people will go out and they'll get equipment that they think somebody says is the best, and so they get this Ferrari of a microphone, and then they don't have a cloud lifter on it, and they don't know how to make it sound good, and then all of a sudden they've got a $400 microphone that won't turn on, and they buy a Blue Yeti microphone or something, and they put it in the middle of their kitchen and start talking, and they pick up every noise from their neighbors to their garage to their kids in the bathroom, so they don't know how to isolate sound and things like that. So the first thing you want to do, though, is get yourself a microphone and a way to record yourself into either an external device or your computer. And right now, the way things are going, it's going to be more towards video. A lot of the podcasting and the conversations do tend to go towards video. I mean, look at Joe Rogan and the myriad of different podcasts out there right now. I mean, it's nothing new. Most of the people listening to this have all seen or heard a multitude of podcasts, so they all get it. But the first thing you need is a microphone and an interface and a computer or something to record your audio into.
Awesome. I was debating whether to ask you about video and if that was a good idea to do both, because I mean, I do it, a lot for, just SEO purposes. YouTube's a big platform, so it seems to make sense that you are recording for, for your listeners for the actual podcast, but you're also throwing it up on YouTube for people who are just searching for information. So is that a wise idea? Is that a wise strategy, or would you focus on just one platform?
Yeah, I think it's really smart to make sure that you're focused on one at first, right? Don't try to do too much. Like, first, focus on your audio. Your audio is the most important thing you should be focusing on, especially in the podcast space. And then you can look at doing video next. So Zoom is such an easy way to do it. StreamYard, if you want to stream to places, is such another easy place to do it. And then obviously using your iPhone or your Android, whatever device you want to record into, it's awesome to do that. But don't get stuck on the video right now. I mean, your goal is to get a message out in a podcast. And majority of podcasts, when consumed, are listened to. So I listen to 90% of my podcasts, and that's where you're going to find the strongest audiences. People are going to listen to stuff, because if you're doing, like we're doing, kind of a long form podcast, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to be something that people hopefully listen to. And if you're listening to it, I hope we sound good, but they're going to come back to it. They're not going to sit there and watch 50-minute show. Mm-hmm. They're going to go and they're going to drive. They're going to be doing stuff. They're going to be on a walk. They're going to be watching their kids, or, just doing household things. And so those are going to be listened to. So focus on audio. And that's like the thing that we try to really focus on with our company. Real Time Radio is the name of our company. And what we really, really emphasize is audio over all else. And then video, if you have the means to get yourself a DSLR or you have the means to get yourself a nice camera, definitely do it. But one thing you want to focus on is lighting. You want to also focus on the format and do some deep, diving into what makes a good podcast studio. So you've got stuff. I've got lights and mics, and I've got soundproofing on the walls. I've got DJ equipment all over the place. I'm also using a dynamic microphone. I don't even know if you guys can hear it, but Carlos, the guy that does all of our yard work, he's out here like hacksawing down a palm tree right now. So I don't even know if you can hear it.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so what we're using, because a lot of times you'll catch that if you're using the wrong mic. I'm using a dynamic microphone by Sennheiser, so all the sound is just going right into this mic. You're not picking up the background noise. You're not getting all the other stuff. Things that you need to know when you're making a podcast. A lot of people will, they'll tell me that I got this beautiful mic. It's amazing. It looks so cool. And then they plug it in, and it's not the right tool for the trade for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge part. Is just to focus on one and then bring in the other as you get comfortable. But I would start with audio. I mean, I really went long-winded on that, but stay with audio. Focus on audio first and then move into film.
This seems to be so much to learn, and it seems overwhelming to me, and I've been even doing this for a bit. Is there some good resources people can use to learn the fundamentals and the basics, or is it just YouTube?
Oh no, there's a ton of different. So I'll tell you my favorite people to learn from. We have a lot of resources at Real Time Radio too. We're not the foremost expert to teach you all the things. There's tons of people out there that already do it, and I'll list out some of those. We can put those in the show notes too. But when it comes to really learning how to podcast, I would say one of the best people in the business to learn how to podcast and to do it sequentially, so you do it in the step-by-step fashion, is to learn from Pat Flynn. Pat Flynn,
yes,
Smart Passive Income. He is incredible, and he's such a nice dude. The things that he teaches and makes it so easy to go paint by numbers on what you need to do. We have the guides. We model a ton of the things that we've done. I mean, imitation is a huge form of flattery, and we imitate what he does and improve on the stuff that we can all the time, because Pat Flynn he's a gangster when it comes to learning how to podcast and learning all the ins and outs of the things he's failed on. He's done it, but he also goes through equipment. He goes through how to host, and he teaches you how to host on the different platforms. And you can definitely go to YouTube and do that, but you're going to be going down a rabbit hole on all those things. But what I'll do is I'll put a guide out there for any of your listeners out there that just want to know how to set this stuff up, which way to go, and what to do next, and I'll send that over to you. And you can find that on our website, as well as you can find links to Pat Flynn and the things that he teaches too.
Awesome. Yeah, so Pat Flynn it wasn't the first time he's been mentioned on this podcast. He's great. He's great.
Yes.
A resource for sure. So you got the fundamentals down, you got the first couple episodes. Now you have to get it out there. You mentioned dynamic ads and Facebook ads. Can you talk a little about is that a wise strategy? What are dynamic ads, and basically how can you market and what the next steps are?
Yeah. Okay. So and to kind of precursor this a little bit too, Joel, this is a touch of the cart in front of the horse for some folks. If some of the folks are listening, the stuff that we're going to kind of cover next, if they're listening to us and they've never started a podcast and this is new, this is stuff to think of down the road. I would not just come out of the gates thinking about how to dynamically insert ads into your podcast right away. I would first I'd first focus on knowing who you're serving, getting your audience and getting comfortable with your niche. That's first and foremost. Before you start really thinking about anything monetization, I would highly suggest that you get really comfortable with who you're talking to and get comfortable in your own skin, because it doesn't matter if you find something that you want to sell inside of a podcast if you're not comfortable and no one wants to listen to you. So that's first and foremost. But for those of you that are listening and want to know some strategies on how to possibly streamline the ways to monetize your podcast, we were talking about a couple different things. There's a thing called dynamic ads, which you had just mentioned. And what's cool about dynamic ads, if you have 30 episodes already up on a platform, whether that's I think Libsyn is the place that does all of our ad placement for us. We use Libsyn with all of our clients. I believe you're on Podbean. Are you on
Podbean? Yeah.
You're on Podbean.
Podbean, yeah.
I believe Podbean does dynamic ad placement. We were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
And what dynamic ad placement means is that you can actually take an advertisement and you can put it in the beginning, or you can put it in the middle, or at the end of the show. We suggest putting it in the beginning part of the show. But you can take an ad and you can put it in one ad, and you can dynamically place that ad through every episode in your shows. So you can do a campaign for something that you're doing in real time. So a lot of folks that are entrepreneurs or they're doing events, they have the ability to take one ad. Like, for example, Mindshare Summit, JJ's event, is coming up next week on Tuesday. Cool thing about what we've done is we've taken an ad for all of her episodes, like hundreds of episodes that they've had. We took one ad and put it in every single one of them dynamically at the push of a button. Mm-hmm. And you can change that out as many times as you want. And if you do that, that gives you such ample opportunity to get in front of your audience with something fresh and new each time, which is huge. And it's, it doesn't even cost that much. If you think about what that would have cost back in the day with TV, with radio, with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the stats inside Libsyn, you can see when people have listened to your ad. You can see the spike with how many people have gone through the ad and listened to it, and you can just see how much that is. And then you can cross-reference that with your sales metrics in your company. So you can see, like, hey, this was listened to tons of times on the 13th of September. What did our ad revenue do on that day? Did we have some more in and around that window? Because if it did, put the pedal down on that, and you can really accelerate. So you have really live metrics, and that's dynamic ad placement. So that's one way that you can monetize a podcast. There's a couple different other ones. Affiliate marketing inside of a podcast, and affiliate marketing, is nothing new. And if you're not familiar with that, it's the performance marketing where you get a commission when you refer people to other companies. That's the easiest way I could explain that. And you'll typically earn money when someone makes a purchase. So that's how that would work. So you could promote, like Joel, if you were, because right now, for example, you're like, Sammy does a ton of, you just asked about DJing for big events. Say somebody books me on your event, you already get a 10% spiff on that for having somebody listen to me and then book me. Or if somebody books Real-Time Radio to produce their podcast, which is always a great idea and vision that we have around it, especially when we're on great shows, then there's also, you get an affiliate cut from that, right? So that's the affiliate marketing side of things. That's a huge part. Sponsorship and advertising. It's a little bit different. A sponsor would maybe come in and there's like, Audible is a sponsor you can get, and who else is lynda.com. Mm-hmm. They like to sponsor a lot of people. I always hear On It will sponsor Joe Rogan. And again, so there's those people are affiliates, but they sponsor Joe Rogan. So they'll pay Joe Rogan to be on the show. The main difference between an affiliate, like what we would get, if you're small, you're not going to get a sponsor. You would have an affiliate commission from that. So that's the difference. The sponsor is usually going to come in with somebody that has thousands of listeners already. So that's something that you're not going to get usually coming right out of the gates to get a sponsor. Then another way that people make money with their podcasts is they have online courses, so they can sell online courses in their podcast. You do you have an online course,
No,
Joel?
no,
Okay.
that's something I'm actually building at this moment. So more to
Oh,
come on
sweet.
that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, one of the things that ClickFunnels does really well. ClickFunnels has an amazing affiliate program. I've seen people go on their podcast teach people how to make an online course in their podcast and then sell that podcast as and then actually sell how to make the online course in their podcast. So it's like this
This
crazy
loop. Yeah.
loop, right?
Yeah.
I'm like
Smart. Yeah.
teaching what I need to learn, and then I'm packaging what I just learned to pay for what I was teaching. It's like a big old matrix kind of thing. So it's cool. There's a bunch of different ways to make that work. So it's funny how you can do that. And then the other thing you can do is you can also promote services like DJing. You can do that, or with your, I guess for us it's easy. I have a podcast. It talks about, I'm an entertainer. We're talking about how to market as an entertainer. I've started a podcast that'll go live in the next couple. It'll probably be in November when it goes live, but it's called The Evolved Performer, and
Okay.
that podcast talks about how to market yourself as an entertainer. It's also we're gonna interview amazing guests from behind the decks because I've got to meet some of the most incredible people and talk to them about how they've made their success. But in the process of that, I'll be promoting my service as a DJ and an entertainer. So you can do that inside your podcast, and there's fun ways to spin that, right? You can talk about the pain. So we talk about what is it like when you have a flat, like, and this is a great example. What happens when you throw an event and it's flat? There's no energy, and all of a sudden you spent $20,000-$30,000 and people aren't having fun at your event. Oh my God, I can't imagine. That must be the worst. But what's great is I've been so used to being brought in to change that part of an event. Like, people know when I show up, it's party time. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna connect. We're gonna go deep, and the event as a result is going to benefit as a whole from it. And see, that pain that you're talking about becomes a thing that you can sell inside your podcast. So when you learn how to market and do things like that, it's really fun. So I love being able to solve stuff. And I just learned about doing some of those things, like that kind of inception marketing and stuff, from Eric Edmeades and some really amazing marketers in the space too. So that's the other things you can sell services. There's coaching and consulting, which is also a service you can sell on your podcast. All of that still stems from serving people, giving them tons of information, giving them tons of love on stuff that they need to know. Then you can crowdsource and get donations on your podcast. That's another way to make money. A lot of people will do things like they will have a payment gateway to access back episodes, things like that. You can do that to make some monetization work for you with your podcast. That'd be like premium content, right? So I give you the taste of how you need to set up an event. I like to use mine just because I know it so well. But say you don't know how to set your event up, I teach you the ins and outs of like how to get the room set up, how to get the ambiance set up. But for a premium, I'm going to give you all the music that you use, plus the high level 1, 2, 3, how to set up your lighting, how to set up your microphones and everything else. If you want to do that, that's a little premium thing we set up. Well, you can do that. You can book us to do that, or we'll give you the step-by-step guide so your team can do it for yourself. So that's how you could promote coaching and consulting inside your podcast. And then there's also physical products you can sell, also kind of an affiliate thing, but a lot of physical products get sold too, which is really fun. You can hear people. I just ordered a thing that I heard about on a podcast called Mud Water, and Mud Water is like coffee but with like chaga root and lion's mane and stuff. And I heard about that. To be totally honest, Joel, I've purchased a ton of shit that I hear about on podcasts. I have an entire cupboard full of On It products and weight loss products and all sorts of stuff that I hear. And so there's great ways to market and sell things like that on your podcasts as well. And then, you know, you can combine the methods. There's tons and tons of ways you can take a smorgasbord of coaching, advertising, affiliate, all those, right? So those are some of the best ways. But I think one of my favorite ways to market and monetize on a podcast is definitely to do affiliate partnerships with folks, especially if they have a really cool product that I am excited to join and to do. There was a lady named Shalene Johnson. I really am excited to have her on on my podcast. She has a thing called Marketing Impact Academy, and I can't wait to talk to some of her students and have them on the podcast and talk about what they're doing. There's another girl, great friend of mine. Her name's the Betty Rocker, Brie Argensinger. I had her on one of my podcasts, and it was so cool. I learned so much more about health and fitness and wellness, and I was like, damn, that's so nuts that we got to dive deep inside our podcast. And then I got to, you know, kind of market her stuff for her, you know? It's just, when done properly, podcasting is one of the best forms of cross-pollination and doing affiliate marketing for people that you really like.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that, and that's a very extensive list. So thank you for that. That's I hopefully that gives some of our listeners and viewers some ideas about where they can take their podcast as well.
Yes, I hope so, because that would mean that your podcast is adding value, and that's what we want to do.
So what are some of the podcasts that you listen to and who do it really well?
I like to listen to, I like to listen to Mike Dillard's podcast. I listen to Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan. I listen to Shalene Johnson's podcasts. My focus, and Pat Flynn, obviously I listen to his, and then I listen to JJ and Carl's because there's his health and wellness. I have 12 categories of my life that I kind of fill out, and one of the things that I do, one of the things that I try to do is fill the bucket of those 12 categories with podcasts or learning modalities in each 12 categories of my life. So in my business category, I listen to everything about marketing. That's where Pat Flynn and all those things come into play. That's where the Shalene Johnson Marketing and Impact Academy stuff comes from. In personal development, that's where I listen to like Jay Shetty and Sean Stevenson of the Model Health Show. I listen to his stuff all the time. Joe Rogan, I listen to mainly for entertainment value, although he is a special creature because he does add so much value. At the same time, he also adds a ton of really good, he just adds a ton of great value, but it's really entertaining. You know, his guests are ridiculous. So, and then with health and wellness, I like to listen to JJ and Carl's. They have a thing called Mindshare Mindcasts. So I listen to that. And then I listen to Bree, the Betty Rocker. She has an incredible health and wellness podcast. The Betty Rocker Show, I mean, she covers, you know, you'll see all of them. They kind of cross over into different parts, you know. You can't really have one without the other. So those are some of my favorites. But yeah, Mike Dillard, Shalene Johnson, Tony Robbins, I'll listen to his. I like to listen to Will Ferrell, has a hilarious one. You know, a really funny one that I listen to if you just want to laugh your ass off is called Wine and Crime. And it's
Wine and Crime, okay.
Wine and Crime, 3 chicks from Minnesota that just get hammered and just talk about crime stories, like this crazy crime stories you hear on like Lifetime Channel and stuff like that. It's hilarious, the shit that they talk about. And you just laugh. You constantly laugh. And I think that's one of the things that you have to do is if you can build your podcast and elicit some sort of emotion from the folks, and then you're doing it right. And that's what's so funny. That's a good example of not just having to serve information to everybody. You can just really be entertaining. I think it's awesome to do both of those if you can. Mm-hmm.
Have you listened to My Dad Wrote a Porno? Do you know that one?
Oh my God, that sounds hilarious. No, I have not.
I've never laughed so hard. You need to check it out.
That's
So,
just and that that eludes me to the next kind of thing that we like to talk about and want to make sure that we really cover is that you got to have a great title. What a great title! My dad wrote a porno podcast. I mean, that is so far out there, and what a great I'll remember that for
mhm.
sure.
So the premise is like obviously the son is sitting around with two friends and they're reading like his dad's book, and it is just hilarious. Like honest, like I've never laughed so hard. And they were doing tours before COVID, and we just missed them. So but highly recommend it.
Yeah,
It's a good one.
totally. That sounds
So
good.
you mentioned titles. So what's a good what is a good title, and how do you come up with one?
So, okay, there's a couple different buckets on this. I'm not the best title creator, but what what we try to help people understand when they're creating a title for a podcast, take Sean Stevenson's show. Uh, his is called the Model Health Show. So you can be, oh, what does that show do? It encompasses model health. Like, oh, this is how you want to really be healthy. Like, this is the model of being healthy. So it answers the pain of what the listener is looking for, right? So that's a great way to go about it, unless it's something super catchy. Like Brie has a huge following, so hers is called the Betty Rocker Show, which is super simple and really easy to really kind of know who you're listening to. It's Bree's show. It's the Betty Rocker Show. Mike Dillard has gone back and forth. He had one called The Self-Made Man,
Mm,
and that's a great Nate. I thought that was an incredible title for a podcast, and in fact, I believe he's selling the rights to that show, and he went back to the Mike Dillard podcast because he has a huge following. So that's another example of just leaning on your name in the marketing space or wherever you're big. Mine is called the Evolve Performer, and that's what you're going to listen to if you want to be an Evolve Performer. So the Evolve Performer podcast is going to show you the right mindset and the right way to manage your career so that you can play dream gigs for people that you love, right? So that's the Evolve Performer. So when you're picking a show, if you can do it right, you can encompass who you are. At the same time, you're also solving a pain in the marketplace for people. Does
awesome.
that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Um, so I want to wrap it up with one last question, and this is something I generally ask my guests, is what is your favorite book, or what is a book that has inspired you?
My favorite book of the last 5 years, I think the book that has probably made the most impact for me, and I wish I could say it was a memoir of somebody or something really, really inspirational, but it was just a tactical book, and it was the one I mentioned before, The One Thing.
Mm-hmm.
That book was so pivotal for me asking the right questions to get things done in a seamless way, at least for my crazy, chaotic ass life. Because if you can ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do that if I do it will make it easier or unnecessary to do the other things, so you can stay focused on the most important thing. And it talks about the power of making that decision correctly. And there's a really good example, and I just kind of leave you with this, and that they talk about knocking down a domino, the first domino in a series. And if you knock down a domino, if that domino, it can actually knock an object down that's twice its size. So a 2-inch domino can knock down a 4-inch one. A 4-inch one can knock down an 8-inch, 16, 32. By the time that has pushed 10 things down, it's pushing down 100-foot building. And so and that could actually, I'm paraphrasing, it might even be bigger than that. But if you do the math and it exponentially gets bigger and bigger, by the time it gets 10 deep, you have gotten so much shit done. You have gotten the one thing done properly. When you push that down, it makes all the difference. So that's been the book that's made the
Awesome.
biggest impact
It,
on me.
it's kind of like the snowball effect, right? Where if you push a little snowball down the hill, it'll grow bigger and bigger and bigger exponentially, right? So,
Oh yeah,
mhm,
absolutely.
mhm.
Hmm.
Well, thanks so much, Sammy, for being on the show. Really appreciate your time. For people who want to reach out to you, who want to start their podcast and need some help, where can they find you?
They can go to www.realtimeradio.live. That has all the amazing stuff you need to know about how to start your podcast, where you can host it. It has some prices if they're looking to just have somebody do all the things that they don't want to, from editing to picking music and all that stuff. Maybe we could do a follow-up deep dive into how to produce your podcast. I think that is something that a lot of folks miss. And then I could set up the camera. We could do a little bit more on the production side of things. This was a little bit more informative, but if we wanted, maybe we could circle back and do a really cool, informative podcast on how to set your studio up, where to get music, what software to use, etc., etc.
Awesome. Well, always, we'll have you back for sure. So thank you so much, Sammy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Publishing for Profit. Please like and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.